Hey guys, Mr. Mini Painter here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I painted Thranduil from the Middle-earth strategy battle game by Games Workshop. At first I was kind of afraid to paint this character because he has very few colors, it's mainly black and red, and you want to make something out of this. So I'm going to show you an easy way, at least my way, the way I did it, and I hope this video is of any help to you guys. So without any further ado, let's get to painting. So I started by painting the model in a light gray primer. I'm just using these regular spray cans from Games Workshop, but you can use any primer you want or an airbrush if you have one. Just give them a light undercoat. You can start dark as well. It doesn't really matter for this mini that much, so we're going to be painting him dark anyway. The reason I chose a bright undercoat is that I'm using contrast paints for this miniature. And I'm using Black Templar as a black for the cloak. And what I love about this black, the main quality of this Black Templar is that it's a bit transparent, it's a bit shining through, and depending on how thick you use your paint, you can create some gray and black layers with this. So I focused on a bit of black for the outside cloak and a slightly brighter undertone for the garments he's wearing underneath, which gives a very subtle difference in blackness. We're going to be highlighting that later on, but for now we're focusing on the base colors. And for the red I'm using Thranduil Brown as a base layer. Now you have to kind of figure out where the red and black stops and begins, and there is some parts hanging over his arm, so you have to kind of figure out what color goes where, so to say. Now I'm continuing on the red by adding corn red to the mix, and I'm covering basically the entire layer. And this Thranduil Brown as a base layer makes this red pop out a bit more. And I'm just going over all of it with pure corn red. And then next up we're going to be highlighting this. And for that I'm using Evil Sun Scarlet. When highlighting, it's always important to keep in mind where your light source is, and so where the majority of the light is coming from. And for this model I chose a frontal approach, so the light is like a sunlight coming from above and just in front of him. That makes highlighting a bit easier, so I'm focusing on the top layers, the top edges, and leaving the lower parts a bit darker. I'm doing the same approach with Fire Dragon Bright as a second highlight and focusing on smaller areas so you get a transition in red from dark to bright. And with the reds done, I'm dry brushing my black with Administratum Gray. And in retrospect, I should have done this in a different order. Do the dry brush first and the red later. So I had to correct a tiny bit of red because I accidentally touched it. So yeah, that was not maybe the smartest way, so even I am learning every video I make. I'm repeating this dry brushing with a gray sear. Extreme brightness on the top layers, mainly the shoulders, the chest, and a bit of the bottom part of the cloak that is lying on the floor. And now it's time to paint the face details. And for that I'm using Cadian Flesh Tone as a base color. As the elven skin is quite bright, you can start with a bright skin undertone. So there's part of the neck, his hands, and the face. Next, I'm washing the skin with a thinned down version of Raglan Flesh Shade. Just mix it with some water or any other thinner you have to about a 50-50 mix, because I don't want to have too dark of a shade in here, because the elven skin should be bright, and so those extreme dark colors don't really work here. In the next step, we're going to be using Chisel of Flesh to highlight all of the skin. So I'm focusing on the fingers, the knuckles, and follow more or less the lines of the muscles in the hands. So leave some of that darkness shining through. And for the face, we're covering about 70% with this Chisel of Flesh as well, focusing on the cheekbones, of course the forehead, the tip of the nose, lips, chin, and leaving the neck a bit darker, but still add some brightness there as well. Then we're taking this bright skin a step further. Since they are elves, they have bright skin, so I'm adding some Palette Witch Flesh to the Chisel of Flesh and repeat the previous step, but decrease the areas that we paint. We get a flow of brightness from darker to bright. And this time I'm focusing on the very knuckles of the fingers, for example, tip of the nose, the cheekbones, the eyebrows, stuff like that. Then with Palette Witch Flesh, I painted in the eyes with white first, and with Abaddon Black I'm painting in a tiny pupil. And then it's time for the blonde hair. And to start, I'm painting a base coat of Zamazi Desert to get some yellowness in there, and we're going to highlight that until it's almost white blonde. But you want to have a hint of this yellow in there. Next step, I'm covering this with Ushabti Bone, covering mostly all of the top layer hair, so you see some tiny part of the previous Zamazi Desert yellow shining through, but I think about 80% is this new blonde look. I'm holding my brush sideways like this, so you do not touch the deeper areas, so you still have the yellow shining through as a sort of natural shade. And if you want to brighten it up a little bit, you thin down your paint and apply the Ushabti Bone as a wash over the yellow. So that way you have some bright parts and some more transparent parts. I'm repeating this step with Screaming Skull as an extreme highlight. I'm really focusing on the front of his head, the top of his head, and those parts of the hair that will reflect the most light. So add some lines here as well to the forehead and the most visible parts of his hair here. Once we're done with this, it's time for the crown. And as you can see here, the crown is made up of leaves and twigs, and for those wood parts, so to say, I'm using dried bark. And you have to kind of figure out what is what, but maybe this reference image helps a little bit, so you can see how this crown is built up. So the dried bark is used for the structure, I guess, of this crown. So the wood parts, that's what I mean. So that's what holds it all in place. And there are some red leaves woven in between. It's a bit of figuring out what goes where. Now for the red part I'm using Wordbearer's Red. And once done, it's time to highlight those. And for the brown, I'm using Baneblade Brown, focusing mainly on the front, leaving the back a bit darker, and of course mainly on the top, as those parts would reflect the most light. And then to highlight the red, I'm using Bugman's Glow. Just a tiny edge highlight and add some details here and there. That adds to the realism of the crown. It creates some illusion of depth in there. And of course the light effects that really make this work. And finally some Carrick Stone for the very tips of the wooden parts of the crown to finish it off. Now it's time for the metal parts. His sword I painted with a base coat of Leadbelcher. It looked like his sword is a completely metal part, and there are some nice details on the side, so we're gonna highlight those later on. And he's also wearing a couple of rings on his fingers, so I gave that a base color of Leadbelcher as well, touching the very dot that is visible here. He's wearing a couple of rings. It looks like 2 on his left hand and 1 on his right hand here. Actually, no, it's 2 as well. And I wanted to add a tiny detail to those rings, so I'm taking some Mephiston red and painting in a red dot as if it were a gemstone of sorts to his ring, but leave some of that metal showing so that it really looks like it's a stone embedded in the ring. You can do so on both hands and choose different colors, of course. I'm adding a highlighted tinier dot of Troll's Lair Orange to create the illusion of a reflection of that gemstone. Next, with some Nuln Oil, I'm washing the sword, and this way you really make those details pop out. So you create some shading inside, and the pattern on the sword is now visible a bit more. Next, I'm highlighting the sword with some Stormhost Silver, so focusing on the top part of the hilt here and the sharper part of the blade. I wanted to create a bright sword with a nice bright metal look. Then with a dry brush, I'm very carefully touching those details on the top part of the sword, so to brighten them up a little bit. I'll also add some sharpness to the bottom. I'm adding some extra color to the top part as well with some brass scorpion, also using a dry brush. Very gently touching the top part to add a bit of extra color to the sword. I think it's a nice detail and it really makes this sword work. And finally for the base I'm using some Garagak Sewer, a Citadel contrast paint which I use a lot for the basis of my miniature because it really approaches this natural sand tone look, and it's ideal for adding some details later on, some tufts or grass or whatever you want. And here's the final result for our Elven King Thranduil. I added some flowers here and there and some tufts of grass to make it look like a really elvish surrounding, and I really love how he turned out. Now if you like this kind of content, please hit that like button and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you, and also consider subscribing to the channel so I can keep you notified on any future new videos that I'll be posting weekly. I also have a Patreon page which I would really appreciate it if you check it out, as I'll be painting a lot of more different games on that channel. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!